Welcome to HICTV's Weekly Roundup. In honor of Human Rights Day 2014, this week's program focuses on human rights defenders in the countries that the Asian Human Rights Commission works in. India has failed to prioritize protecting the fundamental principles that establish the rights of its people. The Philippines has seen continued attacks on human rights workers. Attorney Glosalito Jema, who represents one such worker, gives us an inside look. In Pakistan, political discord adds more fuel to violence that already engulfs the country. From Bangladesh, Mr. Nurul Kabir of New Age provides his perspective on the freedom of the press. In Nepal, the power nexus becomes clearer, and Ms. Mandira Sharma describes what that has meant for her people. In Sri Lanka, while elections are imminent, human rights violations persist. Welcome to HICTV's Weekly Roundup. I'm Jessica Fernando. In 1950, the UN General Assembly made December 10th Human Rights Day in hopes of unifying the world around the worthy concept. This year's slogan is Human Rights 365, referring to the idea that human rights is an important subject every day of the year. In keeping with this theme, HICTV wishes to look back at the last year of work and bring you analysis of the bigger picture. We begin with India, where the failure of thorough justice institution reforms has left human rights guarantees a mirage. The principles of dignity, freedom, and equality for all are enshrined in the Constitution. But even with the interpretations that the courts and parliament have provided, human rights norms require a functioning justice system, which does not exist. Casting a vote once every 5 years is not the essence of democracy. Democracy is about equality, dignity, and freedom, which the Indian state has systematically denied to 60% of its people for the past 6 decades. Unfortunately, reforms to correct this have not been the Indian government's priority. In the Philippines, over the last 10 years, targeted attacks on human rights and political activists have remained pervasive. Extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrest and detention resulting from fabricated charges have become common. One of the cases is the case of Temogen Kokoy Tulawi, an activist who is now in jail. Tulawi was charged for murder based on evidence obtained through torture. HRC-TV spoke to attorney Glosalito Jema, Tulawi's legal counsel, on what impact the prosecution has had on his client's human rights work and how it affects his client's colleagues.
His activities as a human rights documentator, monitoring of incidents, has been, of course, stopped because of these charges filed against him. And the impact of that to the other human rights defenders as well is that it gives a chilling effect that the human rights defenders and monitors can easily be suppressed by false charges, by false prosecution.
Attorney Jema further expresses concern about the complicity of public institutions and the criminal justice system in the fabrication of charges.
And when you are accused in court, you are in detention, so you are disempowered. It becomes kind of a hopeless situation on your part to seek an able and dedicated lawyer to defend you. So in that situation, the state and public institution, and that is the justice system, has in a way failed to perform its function to protect its citizens.
Human rights realities in Pakistan remain grim. The year began with killings, bombardments, and disappearances in the bloodbath associated with Operation Zarb-e-Azb, where the army attempted to flush out militants from the North Waziristan region. The operation saw the number of internally displaced persons rise to 800,000. In terms of enforcement, the government has failed to reform the criminal justice system, which has resulted in providing absolute power to the police, paramilitary, military, and state intelligence agencies. Police violence remains high. More than 750 persons were killed in fake police encounter killings this year. In Karachi, the largest industrial and commercial city in the country, 260 persons were killed in operations against criminals, extortionists, and target killers. In Punjab province alone, 350 persons were killed in encounters. People have begun taking law into their own hands, and many incidents of lynching have been reported this year, with over a dozen more people killed. In a heartrending incident this year, a landlord who was upset with his tenants beat their 10-year-old son and tied the boy to a well pump, mangling his arms to the point that they needed to be amputated at the shoulder. Lawlessness, not rule of law, prevails across the land. In terms of governance, the situation continues to deteriorate under Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, whose return to power remains mired by protests that continue to erupt throughout the country. These protests have led to violence on both sides, and the population is being polarized. This polarization appears to be leading to intensified cycles of intolerance, militancy, and sectarianism that are destroying Pakistani society. The Asian Human Rights Commission has recently interviewed Bangladeshi journalist Mr. Nurul Kabir, the editor of New Age, a national daily newspaper. His opinion about the freedom of press exposes a dark picture about the country's situation. Over to Mr. Kabir.
Bangladesh, as a state, constitutionally guarantees the freedom of expression, subject to some restrictions, legally imposed restrictions. But in practice, Bangladesh has never been a place since its birth in 1971, an ideal place for truly independence of press, freedom of expression and opinion. Over the last more than 4 decades, there is no truly democratically oriented government in place. So all undemocratic governments, be it elected or unelected, be it civilian or it military, the first thing what they do is to try to suppress the public opinion so that there is no organized resistance getting shelled among the people, and no consensus is being built among the people against the repressive rules and regimes and autocratic behavior of the government. So today, particularly after the as a farcical national elections held in January this year, which was not contested by any opposition political parties, the government has proved itself to be an organization which is totally isolated from the people. Any government on earth, when isolated from the people, gets repressive, and first attack they resort to is the public opinion and the freedom of press. As under the circumstances, the journalists are being intimidated directly and indirectly by the government agencies as well as the ruling party hoodlums. Some television channel has been closed down, newspaper editors have been arrested. I myself has been subject to different kinds of intimidation many times. The positive thing is, despite this kind of government repression, there are journalists, there are civil society activists who still protest, of course, risking the life as well as the dignity of their own.
Nurul's full interview can be viewed through HRC's YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/user/humanrightsasia. Next, HRC TV turns to Nepal, where the human rights situation has deteriorated in 2014. There is growing insecurity for the poor and vulnerable in Nepal, and the nexus between the police, the judiciary, and the political parties has become clearer. The police have allied with the elite and the politicians, a bond that has grown after the Second Constituent Assembly elections. Impunity for state agents is noticeable. The Nepal police, in particular, displayed more violent behavior in 2014. The misuse of their power and position in 2014 included regular incidents of custodial torture and increasing police brutality and extrajudicial killings. The Asian Human Rights Commission received reports from the Terai region on a number of incidents where police used excessive force during actions they claim were to maintain peace and order. Torture retains its place as investigation in Nepal. And there is growing understanding in Nepal that the judiciary is neither independent nor competent because the judges of the apex court are determined politically and appointed despite their dubious track records. The state is not concerned with providing justice to its citizens. One example is the Adhikari couple. Nanda Prasad Adhikari died after 11 months of hunger strike on the 22nd of September 2014. 2 months have passed since his death. His dead body remains at the hospital morgue. The family has not claimed the body, and the government has not bothered to take action. HRC TV caught up with Mandira Sharma, a human rights advocate from Nepal, who provides her view on recent developments.
We noticed some progress in some areas. In terms of number of extrajudicial executions, for example, sexual abuse in detention, for example, severity of torture, for example. In terms of number, it has gone down a little bit. This is what we have noticed. Similarly, for long, there was no government. 2014, in the beginning, we had a new government, so that also gave some kind of sense of stability. But unfortunately, even in 2014, the situation of human rights, especially from the perspectives of impunity, from rule of law, delivery of justice, institutional reforms, transitional justice issues, they remain unaddressed. Even in 2014, we did not see truth commissions being materialized. Rather, we saw the regression on this government, despite the previous court order and agitations and grievances repeatedly raised by the human rights organizations, both national and international, and also victims groups. Ignoring all this, government passed legislations that provides amnesty even to those involved in serious human rights violations. And this act also violates the decision of the Supreme Court and our international obligation. Similarly, first time maybe in the history of Nepal, Nanda Prasad Adhikari, the father of a young boy who was brutally murdered, died in a hunger strike. He had to die because of his belief in justice, because of his quest for justice, and he's waiting. He was waiting for justice for so long, and I think any democratic country, this is not what you expect to happen. We experienced this in this year. Similarly, the gender-based violence has also been increased. The overall delivery of justice has not been improved. We did not see any of the cases that have been filed in different detention centers demanding criminal investigations have been investigated despite the court orders. Unfortunately, 2014 remained a very bleak year for human rights in Nepal.
The government of Sri Lanka has taken no interest in protecting the rights of the people. While an election is taking place, the freedom of expression and assembly have been severely curtailed. The election monitors have confirmed attacks on the meetings of the common candidate for the opposition. The people participating in street protests calling for reforms of the constitution have been attacked. Jayatilaka Bandara, a popular singer, was assaulted while participating in street protests, along with a few others, in the presence of the police. After strong protests, some of the attackers were arrested. There have been a series of other instances of attacks on the opposition. There is a widespread perception that the government will use violence to prevent the possibility of a free and fair election. The subordination of the judiciary to the executive president has continued to the point where it no longer exercises meaningful independence. Under these circumstances, all the rights of all the peoples, including the minorities, are threatened. That is all for this weekly roundup. Thank you for watching and see you next week.